Hello, everybody. It's great to see you all. I'll give a few seconds before we really get rolling, just to see if anyone else shows up. Hope you've all been out seeing some good birds. I just came back from a vacation that was pretty much all birds all the time. Just right from where we were staying, there were birds, so it was great for me.
What were the highlight birds from your trip?
Well, there was a golden eagle circling not far from the house we were staying at that I saw several times. So that was really fun. There was a pair of lazuli buntings that it must have been nesting nearby because the male was just singing from a coyote brush right in front of our deck the whole time.
Tell us where you were.
What's that?
Tell us where you were.
So this was at a VRBO house up on top of a hill a few miles east of Cambria. So just up the coast in San Luis Obispo County. And it was just great. We had a really fun time. We were there for 3 days. Okay, anyone else have any fun birding they've done since last week that they want to share? A good time.
I had some project that I had to go to work on. I wouldn't call it fun, but my job was to inspect construction equipment and transmission line towers for nests. And any nests without eggs or chicks, we had to remove because the utility was using helicopters to string new conductor. And so I was, for some reason, house finches just love construction equipment. And they find the weirdest places to build nests, and it was a challenge to find them.
Where was that?
Near Santa Clarita.
Oh, neat.
And then in the towers, the nesting birds of concern, it seems like it's either house finches or kingbirds. Hawks, of course, but those are easy to find. But the kingbirds and the finches are tricky.
So I'm going to say, by the way, I sometimes forget to mention this, but I'd like to request that if you're not speaking, to ask you to go ahead and mute, and not to call you out, but Rob, I can hear you tapping away madly. I think you type the way I type, and my wife always tells me, like, man, are you angry? You're typing so aggressively. It's like, no, I'm just trying.
I'm not angry, but I'll mute myself.
All right, thanks, Rob. But certainly unmute if you have input, because that would be fun. Well, that's neat, Jenny. Where was I that I saw a helicopter doing that? Somewhere along the south coast here. I was at a hawkwatch site, and there was a helicopter, and I started checking it out rather than checking the birds out. And it was hovering over a utility, tower that looked like, and I think there was somebody up on the tower, like they were bringing gear to the person or something. It looked very exciting. Anybody else have input? Lori, I know, actually, Lori Gaskin, I know you were out on Lake Cachuma, right? You did a big survey there. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Yeah, yesterday we did a huge circuit, hit all of the bays, and it was phenomenal. I mean, low numbers, but a lot of diversity. Yeah, it was great.
I saw those great photos you had of the yellow-breasted chat. I guess it's breeding in that bay there.
It actually, we corrected, it was 2 males.
Oh,
so
neat.
yeah, but that was phenomenal. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess I will get going. I have a bunch of content, which is sort of typical, that I want to try and get through, and I'm gonna go fast through it. So we may skip some of it or not get into it all in detail. Hi, Mary Jo. So last Friday, oh, actually, I did have a little top of the meeting thing to mention. So in last week's meeting, I talked about this Forest Service project at Pine Mountain, which is in Ventura County, just east of Highway 33. So sort of the upper elevation pine forest there. And there's a sort of a fast-tracked proposal to do a bunch of logging and brush clearing there that the local conservation organizations are very unhappy about. And reading about it, I share their concerns. So there is a public comment period, and there's a link that I have put in the description for the YouTube live stream, and also on the Carp Without Cars blog post about today's meeting. that you can follow to go to a page from Los Padres Forest Watch where they talk about the project, and they link to where you can go enter your public comments. And the public comment period has been extended. So it had been, you could comment up to June 30th, and now it's up to August 14th, I think. August 14th, July 14th? No, I think August 14th. Anyway, go check that out. The comment period has been extended. So, but don't take that as an excuse not to comment if you're planning to comment. Comment quickly and make sure that the public voice is heard on that, because I think it's important. Okay, and other than that, what was I talking about? So last Friday, right after last week's meeting, I didn't know what we were going to talk about this week, and I went out bird watching at the Carpinteria Bluffs, and I'm walking along through the grass there, and a flock of little twittering birds descended from the sky and landed in the grass right by where I was. And they sort of seemed familiar, but they also seemed very out of place. Like I don't remember seeing them there before. And I finally figured out, oh, they were horned larks. It was a little flock of horned larks, which was really fun. It was very exciting for me because I posted about them, and I got a follow-up email from Paul Lehman going, oh, were there immatures with them? We're trying to figure out, could this be an evidence of local breeding? And I had to say, I have absolutely no idea. I was just like focused on, oh, am I sure they're horned larks? Are they really horned larks? So I was studying them and seeing an adult a few times, but I didn't bother to, and I wanted to get a good count. So I counted them several times, but I didn't even think to look to see if there were any immatures with them. But that was fun. And that made me think, oh, it'd be fun to talk about grassland birds in particular, which is a group that we haven't talked about in one of these meetings before. So that's what I've prepared, is a little talk about grassland birds. And it's, I prepared it quickly, so I didn't do a whole lot of research. And as I've mentioned before, I am not an expert in any sense. I'm just an enthusiastic amateur. So take all the information I convey with a grain of salt. And if you think it's something I said sounds sketchy, call me out on it, please, in real time. Bring it up in the meeting and ask about it. And because I sometimes just, my mouth gets ahead of my brain and I say stuff that's just completely ridiculous. And it's good if we can catch it at the time. So any comments or questions about anything before we move on into the grassland birds content? All right, I'm not seeing anyone, so I will go ahead and share the screen. Let's see if this will work. Oh, you know what? I apologize. I'm going to do it again. I always forget to optimize it for the appropriate options. I have to share the computer sound so you can hear the bird sounds I'm going to play. Okay, so you should now be seeing a big, gorgeous meadowlark, if I have done this correctly. But I cannot see you until I show the video panel. So let me do that. I see thumbs up, so that's good. Okay, so let's talk about grassland birds. So this is actually pretty much where I was last Friday when the horned lark showed up. And I want to say, I have a kind of a love-hate relationship. Well, that's not true. I love grassland birding, but it doesn't always love me. So in the springtime, especially from about March through about, April or May, when the pollen is in the air and the grass is really growing, if I walk through a habitat like this or some other grassland habitats, my eyes get red and itchy and my nose is running. And if I stay out there too long, the birding is really good, so I stay out longer than I should, I'll just be wiped out for the rest of the day. So for me, this is kind of a fun time of year. It's sort of the beginning of my grassland birding season because the pollen is down now and the grass has started to die off and I can go out there without being wiped out by allergies. And just some very general comments about grassland ecology. Grasslands are characterized by grass, but not just grass, but a lot of annual grasses or perennial grasses, a lot of herbaceous plants. It's just not so much with trees or woody stemmed brushes, and yet not like a desert, that's just really sparsely vegetated. Usually you have this thick grass cover. That's your basic grassland. And I'm drastically oversimplifying the subject. There are many, many different kinds of grassland in different parts of the country. Just again, very super simplified. Grasses tend to be wetter than deserts, but drier than forests. the amount of rainfall is one of the factors that tends to influence the existence of grasslands. But there are various forces that are involved in keeping a grassland. Besides climate, there's grazing by animals, fire. Traditionally human set fires was a way that humans have kept grasslands. Out at the Carpinteria Bluffs, there was mechanical tilling. They would go out there with a tractor and they would disc it every few years to keep the coyote brush from establishing there and keep it a meadow. They don't do that anymore since the bluffs were acquired as a park by the city. So I'm not sure, but I suspect that we're going to see some succession, and that if I live long enough, a lot of those meadows are likely to be overtaken by coyote brush. But for now, they're meadows, and it's pretty cool if you like meadows. And grasslands have been heavily impacted by human activity. So, the Great Plains in the center of North America, in years past was just a vast expanse of grasslands, the short grass prairie and the tall grass prairie, and these very rich habitats with abundant animal life and a very diverse ecology. And, the large majority of that has been turned into agriculture. So that obviously negatively impacts organisms that are dependent on grassland habitat. And species that specialize in grasslands have been affected measurably. That a study that came out a year or so ago with the 3 billion birds lost headline that everyone talked about. If you look in some of the details in that paper in Nature that announcement came from, grassland species were the heaviest impacts, the ones that had seen the largest losses in terms of just the population of bird species. So, it's an important habitat, and it's definitely worth paying attention to and learning about. And again, I apologize that I don't know more about it. This is a very, very superficial discussion of it. I see Andrea Adams-Morton is in the meeting, and if we could do this over again, it'd be fun to just have Andrea give the talk and talk about grassland ecology, because I know you
wanted to add one or two little things.
Yes, please do go ahead before we move on, because I'm basically going to move on to the birds at this point. So please give me your input on grassland ecology.
One of the things that happens in a grassland is that often it's like a clay soil. So it's not as good as other soils. And so the grasses are able to grow in it, but other things aren't. And most of our grasslands now are all annual aliens. Our bluffs happen to be a perennial grass from South Africa, so it's a little different. Yeah. And a lot of people, the people from the California Native Grass Association, a lot of them think that in a native grassland, there are more forbs, the little plants, than there are grasses even. So that's another thing to be to think about. I know there was some people that were saying, how keeping this type of grass in this grassland is great for the predators, because it has a lot of thatch, so that it's good for the mice and things. But it is good for the mice and things because there's so much thatch, the predators can't see them, and so it's hard on them. Whereas if it was native grasses, they'd be more separated and bunchy. So that's something to think about too, on why it's better to have native grasses. Yeah. And I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, I realizing that the meadows at the Carpinteria Bluffs are this, dominated by this non-native grass species. It's certainly better to the extent we can preserve or restore the native vegetation, because we get that whole set of ecological associations, and you get the insects, and you get this whole big food web that you don't necessarily get with the non-native species. So yeah, it would be neat to do real grassland restoration. And I know that is it Channel Islands Restoration? They were doing some interesting projects in the Potreros, which are these high elevation grasslands like in the northeastern part of Santa Barbara County, and going out there and doing surveys. And I had a chance to go on one of them, and I pulled the plug at the last minute because it was right during the peak of my allergy reaction. And I just couldn't imagine being out there, you know, a day or two away from civilization camping with these folks. And it would be great to see the birds, but if I became just completely debilitated, I wouldn't be helping. So I didn't go on that trip. Anyway, I'm going to move on though, because I want to get to birds. Oh, okay. So let me talk about, this was fun. This is a long-tailed weasel that was in a little patch of grassland out near Buellton when I was birding there a month or so ago. You know, so something I was thinking about in terms of birding in grassland specifically is that seeing grassland birds is challenging at times. And I thought about why that is. And I think, you know, part of what's going on is that, say with wetland birds, you know, you got ducks out there in the marsh or whatever, they know you're not going to get to them, right? They feel quite comfortable out there floating along in the water, and you can see them, they're out in the open and they're safe and they're going about their business. Or, you know, forest birds, again, you know, little warblers, if they're a few feet up in a tree, they might be hard to see in the foliage, but they don't necessarily flee and hide from you. You know, they know that you're not going to come bother them. But grassland birds don't really have that degree of protection from ground-based predators. So this weasel's out there, you know, hunting through the grass, and the bird species that live in that habitat, they view those ground-based terrestrial predators as a real threat, and they have evolved, you know, ways to survive in that context. So they avoid, you know, if you're walking through a grassland and you want to get a good look at those grassland birds, they don't necessarily stay close to you. You know, you'll see them flitting away from you in the distance, but they know perfectly well where you are, and they maintain a certain, you know, defensive perimeter from you that makes it hard to really get a good look at them. And they're also very well camouflaged. You know, these birds by and large look very similar if you're looking at the back of the bird, because they all look like grass. You know, they just disappear. They land in that stuff and they're just gone. Even if you're looking right at them, they can be very hard to see. And their vocalizations can be hard to localize. They tend towards these high, thin, kind of, you know, these vocalizations that sound like they could be coming from anywhere, at least for me. And it's very tough for me to zero in on where the bird is that I'm hearing. So these are all things that make it kind of challenging to see grassland birds. So I'm gonna, again, go pretty quick. I wanted to show just a few of the places that I like to go birding in grasslands, starting close here to Carpinteria and then going a little further out in Santa Barbara County. So the Carpinteria Bluffs that I've been talking about, you know, those horned larks that I saw last week were right around here in this area near the Baylord Avenue, the Baylord Avenue parking. A little later in the year, when we start getting a lot of savanna sparrows, this is a neat spot to see them. And there's other kinds of sparrows and other cool stuff going on in there. But we'll talk about the specific birds in a minute. Oh, actually, I did want to mention too. So, and also there's frequently a pipit flock, a big flock of American pipits out here on the tea time driving range. Yeah, Rob, I see. Are you raising your hand to make a comment or just stretching? Just stretching, okay. But this is, you know, if you're looking for your pipits and you want to sift through those pipits looking for the rare, you know, red-throated pipit that might be in there, that's a good spot in Carpinteria to find your pipits, is out there at the driving range. So this is Elings Park, so up in Santa Barbara, but not too far away from Carpinteria, sort of this is like the mesa up in Santa Barbara. So here's Las Positas comes down and here's Cliff Drive. And it's hard to see the topography from this view, but this is a you know, raised mesa up here. And the times I've birded up here, I often come down to the end of Calle Montilla and park right here. And then there's a gate that you can get in and walk through this meadowy area. And there's been some really neat rarities up there. There was a bobolink up there, I think a year or two ago, and they see interesting birds up there. And Peter Gady birds there a fair amount. So if he's walking through, if there's a rare bird up there, he's likely to see it and report it because he's excellent at finding those things. And you go a little further west in Santa Barbara, you get to More Mesa. And I don't even know where the name comes from, but I just remember it as, oh, there's More Mesa there. It's so big, it's so huge. Because it really is a very extensive mesa with a lot of really neat birds. I usually get there coming south, and I don't even remember now what the road is, but you know, look it up, you can find it. But usually I enter from this corner over here, but there's other ways to get in there from these neighborhoods. And just very extensive grassland. I think that's where the short-eared owls were being seen last fall or last winter. And burrowing owls have been seen there. Two very cool birds that I won't talk about today because we're talking about other birds and we talked about owls recently. But there's a lot of really neat grassland birds there. And then a little further west, Elwood Mesa. So this is over here on the east side of Elwood Mesa is the North Campus open space that we've talked about in a previous meeting. And then if you continue west from there, you come into this area, Elwood Mesa. And that's one of the best places I've found, at least in the Santa Barbara area, to find grasshopper sparrows. So there's a whole group of them that nested, like 5 or 6 or 7 of them vocalizing in this area here. So that's fun. A little further west, so you get, west. You go a little further west, and just west of, Goleta, and you get out into where the country opens up, and Farron Road is a really popular spot for birding. And if you go all the way up to the north end of Farron Road, is a good place for common ground doves. They're up there in the avocado orchard. There are a few of them usually. But then down here in the lower end, there's these big meadows, and blue grosbeaks have been there. It's a good spot to see them. Anyway, I'm going to go quick through this stuff. If you go out San Marcos Pass, the 154, and you go beyond Lake Cachuma just a little bit, there's this little triangular chunk here. This is Armour Ranch Road, and that's a really neat spot to see horned larks. And when boy, my brain is already starting to turn to mush. When they longspurs, and occasionally when longspurs have been seen, they're often mixed in with the horned lark flocks out here along Armour Ranch Road. Mountain bluebirds sometimes. So it's a cool spot. This is another favorite meadowy area. This is where I discovered the downside of me staying out longer than I should in the midst of the allergies, because it was just so fun being out there and seeing all the really cool birds out there. But this is San Miguelito Road south of Lompoc. You take I Street, I think it is, that goes south out of Lompoc and goes past Miguelito County Park. Is a neat little oak woodland. But you go further and you come out to this open meadow area that has really neat birds. A lot of horned larks here as well. A lot of raptors here because it's all ground squirrel country. So that's a neat spot to go. That's actually slated for development, though. They're going to put in it's been approved to have a big wind farm installation with really large wind towers. So I don't know if any of you have followed this, but Santa Barbara Audubon has made objections to some features of this and looked for them to alter the project to be less impactful to the raptors that live out there. But it's a really great spot, and I certainly encourage people to visit it now before that change happens if you get a chance. Even further out, so this is west of Lompoc on the way to Ocean Beach Park, which is kind of off the screen to the left. But these agricultural fields have really neat birds, and the fields are kind of lined fallow and weedy. And I have seen bobolinks there, lots of pipits, lots of horned larks, lots of sparrows. It's a really neat area. It is private property, so you have to be careful. I mean, you can certainly bird from the public road. There's some spots where some birders go onto the fields with some degree of understanding from the property owners. I don't want to get into the details because I don't actually know the details. But you can also just bird from the road. And this road down here, Renwick Avenue, again, has really neat open country birds that like agriculture fields, fallow ag fields. It's a really good spot for that. And then the last place I'll mention is way up in like the northwestern part of Santa Barbara County. You take Brown Road, kind of near Orcutt, like Orcutt is up here. The Point Sal Trail is a really neat trail that goes up through some grasslands, and I saw probably more grasshopper sparrows than I've ever seen before along this trail a few years ago. So that's a neat spot too for grassland birds. Okay, so I've broken up the actual birds that I'm going to talk about into 3 different groups. And it's kind of a mishmash of birds. It's not, they come from different groups, and I've just kind of picked ones that are my favorites, and some of them are more frequently seen birds and some are rarer birds that occasionally might occur. There's a number of species that I've just never seen, even though I've tried. So, birds that are hard to see and birds that are easier to see are all together here. But in the first group, I have some sparrows and a grosbeak. And just looking at the histogram from eBird, this again shows you the percentage of eBird checklists from Santa Barbara County that contain each of these species for each week during the year. So you can kind of see when they're around and when they're not around. So Savannah sparrows, pretty easy to see throughout the year. And we'll talk about sort of the interesting, there's a couple of different subspecies of them that we can see in Santa Barbara County, and they have very different migratory habits. So that's interesting. Lark sparrows, not quite as easy to see in Santa Barbara County, but again, if you make the effort, you can see them throughout the year. Grasshopper sparrows are really interesting. You know, you can see them best during the spring, like April, May, June. That's when they're relatively easy to get if you know where they breed, because you go there and they're singing, and the males will, you know, go up in a bush and they'll do their grasshopper sparrow song. It's very distinctive. We'll hear an example of it in a minute. But the rest of the year, much harder to find them. And it could be that they've left, you know, they could be migrating and leaving the area, or, you know, and Paul Lehman talks about this in Birds of Santa Barbara County. It could be that they're staying. It's just, they're super hard to find. You know, they don't, like the Savannah sparrows, pop up in the bushes and let you see them a fair amount. But outside of the breeding season, the grasshopper sparrows really don't. They're just, you know, down there next to the ground and very difficult to see. So that's sort of an interesting mystery. And then blue grosbeak is definitely migratory and shows up here during the breeding season, and then actually travels south in the winter and goes down to Mexico and Latin America, and we don't have them anymore, but we have them now. So it's a good time to see them if you're interested in seeing those birds, and who would not want to see a bird like a blue grosbeak? Okay, I'm going to get my songs ready so you can hear some vocalizations. And while I'm doing that, any questions, comments about stuff we've talked about so far? You know, I get on a roll and I just talk forever, but I want to make sure that I have an opportunity for people to
Yeah,
give their
John.
input. Yeah, Rob.
I know that Savannah sparrows and grasshopper sparrows have a very hard to hear song.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's typical of grassland sparrows or just those two.
Yeah, you know, again, I'm not super expert to where I could give you a broad survey just from my own recollection, but you know, my sense is that, yeah, those very high pitched, thin, you know, kind of vocalizations I was talking about earlier that Savannah sparrows certainly have and grasshopper sparrows have, seems to be a characteristic of these grassland sparrows, you know, that they have, and some of the other birds too, like the horned larks and the pipits, you know, pretty high sort of thin vocalizations seem to be a feature that a lot of them share. And I know,
you see Savannah sparrows and they're teed up like with their beaks open, and I can't hear anything coming out, but I know they're singing.
Yeah, and you know, for a lot of birders, as we age, that's the first thing that goes, right, is that upper register. Yeah. Okay, well, so let's see, I'm gonna go to this bird here. And here is an example. This is, all these recordings are from xenocanto.org, and this is a recording of this species by Jared Swackhamer. And it's just these little high, thin calls. This is a good example. So Rob, were you able to pick up on those, or is that like outside your range?
I could tell there was some sound, but I couldn't really make it out at all.
Yeah, very high pitch, just little high sip, sip, sip kind of sounds. Here's another, so that's what I think of as a call of this species. And here I'll reveal it. This is in fact the Savannah sparrow. And there's several different subspecies of Savannah sparrow, and I'm weak on my Savannah sparrow subspecies. I can't even tell you which one this is. But here is a song of a Savannah sparrow. This is a longer vocalization. This is recorded by Paul Marvin. There's some more distant ones. I think there was a closer one. I'm waiting for it to sing again. And some killdeers also. There it is again. So The interesting thing with the savanna sparrows is, so this is the eBird sightings map, and I made this screenshot just a day or two ago. So the blue dots are anywhere the savanna sparrows have ever been reported in Santa Barbara County, and then the red dots are sightings within the last 30 days. And what you see is that they're throughout the county, but this time of year, during the breeding season, we're here in late June, they're really clustered in just a few places near the coast. And so what's going on there is these are the salt marsh residing subspecies. This is the Belding's savanna sparrow, at least in the southerly cases, and maybe a different, there's some question about whether it's a Belding savanna sparrow or a different subspecies whose name I forget that is also a salt marsh specialist. But there's a few of these savanna sparrows, this one subspecies or these two subspecies that live year round in the salt marshes. So here in the Carpinteria salt marsh, like that's what these red ticks are here. That's, there's savanna sparrows out there singing away. But there aren't many savanna sparrows that you can find outside of that habitat in this part of the country at this time of year. And if we look real quick at the status and trends animation at eBird, you can kind of see how savanna sparrows move throughout the year. So here they are in the winter when we have lots of them, and then in the breeding season, they all head up north, and then in the fall, they come back south again. But what it's not showing is there's this little pocket of these salt marsh residing Belding's savanna sparrows, amongst others, that stay and breed down here. So that's kind of fun. And as we, as the year progresses, we'll get an influx of many, many more savanna sparrows that are not the Belding's type, the salt marsh sparrows. But for now, if you want to see them, that's the place to go see them, is the salt marsh. All right, I'll move on to this one. I like this sparrow a lot. There were some of them actually up where we were vacationing the last several days, so it was neat to see them there. Here is a recording of a call that this sparrow makes by Bruce Lagerquist. And an interesting little chatter it makes. And then here's its song. There's a quail in the background. So this is a lark sparrow. And I just like them a lot because that bold face pattern, really makes them, if you can get a look at them, makes them hard to miss. You can identify them relatively easily. A lot of sparrows are kind of challenging. They all have kind of similar facial patterns, similar characteristics, but the lark sparrow stands out. And here's where you can see them in Santa Barbara County, and pretty widely distributed. They like open grassland, open areas. Not so much down here in Carpinteria at this time of year. You kind of need to maybe get out inland in the Santa Ynez Valley or west of Santa Barbara. There's a cluster where you can see them currently. I think they've been seen along Farron Road. I showed those aerial views earlier. Farron Road, they have lark sparrows out there this time of year. And just in the interest of keeping moving, I'm not going to pause to look at their abundance animation. I'm going to move on to this species, which again is one of my faves. And here's its song. I don't have a call for this one. This is Paul Marvin's recording as well. I thought I did. Let's hear. There we go. So this is the grasshopper sparrow. And there was I think a western meadowlark also kind of making chop, chop kind of calls in there. But the tick, tick, I can't do the trill, but that sort of insect-like buzzing, that's the song of the grasshopper sparrow. And these are the ones I was talking about they're around throughout the year, maybe, but the springtime when they're singing that song is really the best time to see them. Yeah, Rob, did you have some input on grasshopper sparrows?
Sibley has this grasshopper sparrow song. You want me to play it?
Sure, sure. Just, yeah, very high pitched.
Can you hear it at all?
I could hear what I think was it. I mean, I didn't hear it as well, but I don't know how well you're hearing the stuff I'm playing at my end. So maybe it's, you know, maybe I'm hearing the same way you guys are hearing the stuff I play.
Never mind.
All right, well, I need to keep moving because again, I'm already behind. I can tell this is going to go long if I don't keep up the pace. So this is just a very fun species that again, I was seeing on our vacation this week, and they like the open grasslands. Here is a call. It's recorded by Jared Swackheimer. That sort of sharp kind of chink. And then here is its song. And this is a recording by Ron Overholtz. So this, of course, is a blue grosbeak. So it's the male, you know, it's got that blue color and kind of the rusty patches on the wings and that big beak. It's hard to miss or hard to mistake it for anything else. The females is, you know, brownish, a little bit of blue on the rump area. And they have this behavior where they wag their tails sideways. Like if you see them perched and look for it, they kind of do this sort of thing with their tail at times. Anyway, those are very fun birds. You know, you can find them various places. I think this is probably Farron Road. This spot out here has been a pretty reliable place to see them. We get them in Carpinteria sometimes. I haven't seen any down here this year, but at the Carpinteria Bluffs is a good place to look for them. And I will go ahead and look at their abundance animation just to kind of see what they do, because it's pretty interesting to me. So this is in the winter. This is January. They're all down in like Mexico and Central America. And then May, you know, they come on up and they spread out in North America. And then September, they all leave again. So we are in their breeding range, but they don't winter here, which is kind of a switch. Most of the, you know, our grassland bird diversity gets better in the winter usually because a lot of species that breed farther north come down here for the winter, but not the blue grosbeak. They're a more southerly species. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next group of birds. This is sort of a grab bag of some different kinds of birds. If you look at this, you know, this histogram, you can see the western meadowlark is the easiest of these to find. Horned lark also here throughout the year, but a little bit, you know, shows up in a smaller percentage of checklists submitted to eBird for Santa Barbara County. So you have to roam around a little bit to find a spot where where horned larks are. American pipit, quite common here in the you know, winter months, but not during the breeding season. They go north at this time of year, so I don't think there's any American pipits around right now. We should get them in September. It'll be fun to see them come back. And then red-throated pipit, I threw in here, even though it's a bird I've never seen in Santa Barbara County, and I've tried. They're really an old world species, but occasionally one of them, you know, coming, usually a first-year bird, comes south on the wrong side of the Pacific and comes down the Pacific coast of you know, Western North America. And usually they'll be mixed in with a flock of American pipits, and you sit there and you sift through all the pipits, and maybe there's a red-throated pipit. Or, well, actually, I'll talk about them when I get to them. But first, I'll do this species. So here's a gorgeous bird, and here's a recording by Thomas Graves of its call, one of its calls. And then here's a recording by Thomas Graves of its song. Which I just really love. I think it's a really beautiful song. This, yeah, did I stop it? I did stop it. And this is the western meadowlark. So, you know, looking at the front of the bird, it's hard to miss, right? I mean, that's like a neon sign. But if they, you know, turn around and face the other way, again, in a field of dead grass, this bird can disappear very quickly. But they're, they're bigger than a sparrow. They're more like starling sized, or even maybe a little bigger. You see them on the ground. They have a characteristic where they'll fan their tail open. Sometimes if you see them perched, you'll see them doing that motion, and you can pick them out at a distance. Oops, too fast. So they're throughout the area, throughout Santa Barbara County, or at least the big open grassy areas in Santa Barbara County. But during the breeding season, they are harder to come by. Like, I don't think we have records of them breeding, or at least not a lot of records of them breeding in the Carpinteria area, or even on the South Coast in general. The recent records for them are up here in the Santa Ynez Valley. So it's one of those species that, for breeding, it tends to go to these specific locations, but then after breeding, it'll disperse back out, and then we'll get them again. We see them at the Carpinteria Bluffs a lot. We see them at the Carpinteria Salt Marsh a lot. This species is fun. Let's see. Here's a call by Martin St. Michel, made this recording. And here's a song. Richard Webster made this recording. This is a bobolink. So the breeding plumage male is this bird on the left, and I've never seen one in this plumage. I'd love to go. I mean, if my allergies would allow it, I'd love to go to the Great Plains in bobolink breeding country and get a look at a breeding plumage male. The only ones I've seen around here look more like this. The non-breeding males and the females, the immatures, they look more like this bird here. It's almost like a sparrowish looking bird, but with a lot of yellow on it. And as you see there, these are all eBird sightings ever. They can be tough to find, and usually in the fall is when you'll see one show up. So watch eBird or follow the SBCO birding email list. If someone finds a bobolink, they'll often share it with the group so people know they can go chase that bird and get a look at it. Here's another fun bird. So here is a call. This is a recording by Rob Van Bemmelen. So that's its flight call, and this is the horned lark. And this is actually, that's what I heard, that group of 7 birds at the Carpinteria Bluffs last Friday. That's what they were doing. They were making that call as they flew. Here's its song. This is a Paul Marvin recording. And they are found, sometimes you can see them around here. I'm very proud of this red, this red dot here. That red pin is my horned larks. But really, if you want to see them during the breeding time, the Cuyama Valley is a good place to go. They're up there, and you can hear them making that song. Out here west of Lompoc, this is, I think, San Miguelito Road, probably this red pin here. Ocean Beach Park, there's some horned larks that are breeding out there. So if you go there and Ocean Beach Park is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if I think it's open now that you can actually walk to the beach. They close it during part of the year for the snowy plovers, or maybe it's actually closed off now. We're in snowy plover breeding time, aren't we? I don't know. I haven't been there in a while. I don't travel around as much as I had been in previous years. Anyway, there's some horned larks there, and you can see them if they do have the beach area closed off, and you park at Ocean Beach Park and you kind of walk under the train trestle there, you can get as far as you can get to look west towards the beach. You can often see those horned larks in there. Okay, I'm gonna keep on going though and talk about these birds. So I just really like these birds. I think they're very cool. Here is the flight call of this species. This is the American pipit. Although in Xenocanto, it's listed as the buff-bellied pipit, which I think must be its common name in other parts of the world. Apparently there's some disagreement about what to call this bird, but it's the same bird. You'll see these, again, the driving range at tea time out near the Carpinteria Bluffs is a great place to see them in the winter when they're around. There'll be a flock of them just out, and they walk. They're sort of sparrow-like, except their beak is clearly not a sparrow beak. It's this longer, thinner beak, but otherwise they're kind of brownish and streaky. But they don't hop, they walk. So you'll see them kind of walking along and kind of doing a little pigeon thing with their head as they're walking along. So I just enjoy watching them. And then they'll all fly at once, and you'll hear that zip, 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 zip kind of vocalization we were just listening to. You can find them grassy areas throughout Santa Barbara County, but not right now because they're all up north. In fact, here I will indulge in looking at their animation because it's fun to see where these birds go. Here we are in February, March, April, and there they all go way far north. And then August, September, they show up again. So occasionally, if you're very fortunate, one of these will be mixed in with them, and it makes a different flight call. And my understanding from those who I've pestered annoyingly, like, how do you get this bird? They'll say, well, okay, you have to learn this particular flight call, and you'll get a flock of the American pipits flying with their zip, 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 zip. And then in with all that, you'll hear one of these. And this is a recording by Jarek Matuziak. Which is different. And this is a red-throated pipit. So compared to that American pipit, it's streakier. It's got this dark streaking on the back, and on the front area as well. It's got these crisper lines. Like if I go back and compare to the American pipit, there's some variation with pipits, but American pipits tend to be on the lighter side, especially on the back, compared to the red-throated pipit, which in breeding plumage is quite distinctive, but we're unlikely to see one in breeding plumage. We're more likely to see like a first-year immature bird or a non-breeding adult bird. You can see a little bit that like a lot of these like the American pipit, it has these white outer tail feathers. So when it's flying, you'll see that in flight. It's more prominent. And yeah, very few occurrences of this species in Santa Barbara County. I think these are the South Patterson ag fields out in Goleta. There's like a particular set of agricultural fields where, folks like Nick Letheby will go out and just kind of tromp through the ag fields, looking at all the pipits and picking out the occasional red-throated pipit. And this is kind of similar. This is those like the Floridale ag fields west of Lompoc that I was showing the aerial photo of back at the beginning. Red-throated pipit out there. So one day I will see a red-throated pipit in Santa Barbara County, but not today. Sometime in the fall, hopefully. Okay, and then a trio of species, just to round things out. I have not seen any of these birds. I have tried to see them. There's been reports of them, and I've gone to look and see if I can find them, but so far no luck. These are long spurs. They don't really belong here. It's again one of this fall vagrant kind of scenarios where occasionally a first-year bird just goes off in the wrong direction and will hang out with a bunch of pipits. So typically you're looking, or a horned lark flock, you're looking at a big flock of pipits or horned larks, and in there will be a bird like this. So, just brownish, hard to see, creeping along. They kind of creep along. They're sort of like, I don't know. I mean, I've looked at video. Again, I've never seen one in person, but they sort of this hunched posture as they creep along on the ground. Here's a call recording by Richard Webster. And here is a song recording by Paul Marvin. And you can tell the species is out there with some cows. This is a chestnut collared longspur. And here's where they've been recorded ever in Santa Barbara County. Again, kind of out here west of Lompoc in those ag fields, I think is what we're seeing here. And this is that Armour Ranch Road area I was talking about, kind of the intersection of the 246 and the 154 out here west of Lake Cachuma, northwest of Cachuma is where they have been seen. And then a few sightings down here in the Santa Barbara area. And you can go consult, Lehman's Birds of Santa Barbara County for specifics on those sightings, because there's few enough that all the details will be in there. And then also some sightings up here in the Cuyama Valley. Here's another one. Just for fun, I'll play its recording. Not that I expect to ever hear this. There's some flight calls. By Mats Relmar made this recording. And here's another vocalization. Lars Edinius made this recording. This is a Lapland longspur, which, as you can tell from the name, is not really from around here. All right, and then one more, and again, similar kind of mixture of sightings data are, again, Armour Ranch Road out here and west of Lompoc in those ag fields is some of the places it's been seen, and then a few scattered spots in Santa Barbara as well. I think this is probably those South Patterson ag fields I was talking about. And this is maybe Ealing's Park, maybe, not sure. And one last species sounds like this. Here's a recording by Paul Marvin. And here's a recording by Thomas Megarian. This is McCown's longspur, a bird that has figured prominently in some of the recent proposals at the American Ornithological Society for name changes. They have a committee that evaluates requests for name changes, and there's a couple of different sort of controversial issues in the world of bird name controversies. One is that there are people who are making the case that we should not have honorifics. Well, there's actually a couple of different complaints being made, not complaints, a couple of different suggestions being made. One is that we get rid of the apostrophe S, and there's a long explanation for why birds that are named after a person with an apostrophe S, that it's actually bad grammar, or it's incorrect grammatically to construct that in that form. And there's other people that say, well, we shouldn't be honoring people by naming birds after them. It's a legacy of, centuries ago, male white naturalists rewarding their male white naturalist buddies, and we should move on from that era. And then there's more specific examples, like in this case, McCown was an Army officer who was fought for the Confederacy, and there's people who argue that we should not be honoring people who engaged in that sort of thing by immortalizing them in the form of a bird name monument. And so these things get discussed and they go back and forth, and maybe we'll see change in that area. But for the meantime, it's in the field guides as McCown's longspur. And that, I think, oh yeah, and again, it's been seen in Santa Barbara County around Armour Ranch Road is basically the only place it's been seen in Santa Barbara County. And I would have to go read Lehman to find out when that was, but probably some time ago. That's it. And just a few more shots of the long-tailed weasel because I thought it was cute. Actually, photographing this weasel, it was very oblivious to my presence. I think it was really focused on, whatever it was hunting. The hardest thing for me was keeping it in the frame, because it was just like zip, 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 zip. It was all over the place. So that was about that blurry shot is about the best I could do in that case. And that is it. That is it for I talk about grassland birds. Yeah, Rob, I see you have your finger up.
Yeah, I just want to mention a couple of things about Carp Bluffs. In the last week or so, there have been 2 coyote attacks on dogs, one on a Labrador. So this coyote's not fooling around. So
Okay.
if you bird up there, I wouldn't take your puppy with you.
Yeah, I saw that on nextdoor.com. People were
Yeah.
talking about that.
And the other thing is, I hadn't been seeing green herons in the marsh for quite a while, but now I've seen them 3 times in a row. So I've seen one.
Cool. Is that like in the Franklin Creek channel, like near the footbridge? Or?
Twice it was in Franklin Creek, and once it was Santa Monica Creek. Yeah. So
And
it's
have you
nice to see.
and have you seen the yellow-crowned night herons lately? Because my understanding is that they've left. You know, they've.
Somebody told me last week they had Mario. I think Mario might have had one. Oh no, that was at Andrew Clark. It wasn't here.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're vacationing elsewhere.
Yeah, Suzanne, I know you've seen them up at Goleta Beach Park, right?
Yeah, he's been there almost every day. I look. So
Yeah.
that's the same one, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's a species that had not occurred for a long time in Santa Barbara County, and then they're breeding successfully down at Point Magoo, you know, a little bit south of here, and they're expanding because there's more of them, and they move out. And so we've had them in Carpinteria now, in the Carpinteria Salt Marsh for a number of years. But apparently, like at breeding time, they leave, they disappear to somewhere. I see Andrea saying something. You have input on the locations of the yellow-crowned night herons, Andrea?
No, I haven't seen them for a long time.
Yeah.
I was going to say that we used to have those weasels at the Bluffs.
Oh, neat.
It was a long time ago, though.
Yeah, I think I've only seen them 3 times in my life. So that was the most extensive weasel sighting I've ever had. It was out by Buellton, that one that I photographed. Okay, any other comments either on grassland birds or anything else? Do people have any suggestions for what to talk about next week? I mean, we can recycle an old topic. We can do something new. You just leave it up to you know, whatever I figure out, or you can email me suggestions or. Okay, well, okay. So I'm curious who has. It sounds like House Finch. Someone has. I see, and Catherine Moody says in the chat.
That's me. Yeah, I'll mute.
No. Well, in this case, I like it. It's bird
Okay,
content.
The feeder's right outside the window. So.
Excellent. Common feeder species. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It was a lot of fun. You know, I had fun learning more about grassland birds. Obviously, there's some species there I need to learn more about. I think some trips to the Great Plains, like those McCown's longspurs, you know, that's their normal range is out there in the middle part of the country. If I could learn to, you know, if I could learn the birds there, then I could come back here, and if one shows up, I think I'd have a better chance of spotting it out there mixed in with the birds I'm more familiar with. But as it is, it's very tough. Okay, well, again, thank you all, and I will talk to you later, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.